The crystal shattered on the marble at the exact moment the string quartet held its breath between movements. Champagne pooled around Vivienne Hartwell's heels. She turned, slow and sharp, toward the man kneeling with a towel. "You don't belong in this room." Her voice cut through the silence. "Look at me when I'm talking." 200 guests went still. Marcus Thorne smiled, almost gently, the way a man smiles when the night is going his way. The janitor lifted his head. He did not flinch, did not lower his eyes. Across the ballroom, Walter Briggs set his glass down too carefully. Ethan's rolled sleeve had slipped half an inch. 6 hours earlier, the truck pulled up to the service gate of the Hartwell estate as the last of the afternoon light bled out over the battery. Charleston smelled of marsh water and old brick. Ethan Cole stepped down, lifted his toolbox from the bed, and stood for a moment looking at the white columns through the live oaks. He had worked this house twice before. He had never been inside the ballroom. His phone buzzed against his hip. He answered on the second ring. "Daddy." "Hey, sweet pea. Mrs. Park gave me a 10 on the reading test." Lily's voice came out in a rush, like she had been holding it in all afternoon. She said, "I read it like I meant it." "You always mean it." Ethan leaned against the truck, the toolbox at his feet. "What chapter are we on?" 11. "The part where the pig figures it out. Save it for me. I'll be home before midnight. You promise?" "I promise." She made him say it twice, the way she always did, and then she handed the phone to Mrs. Doreen next door, who told him supper was warm on the stove and not to thank her again. He hung up. For a moment, the lines on his face went soft. Then he picked up the toolbox and walked through the gate. The event manager met him at the side entrance, a tablet in her hand and a headset clamped to her ear. She did not look up. "Cole. Bathrooms, kitchen, ballroom floor. You stay invisible. Don't speak to guests. The Hartwells don't see staff. And tonight especially, they don't see you. We have the governor, 2 senators, and the entire Charleston board. Understood?" "Understood. There's a checklist on the back hall. Move." He moved. In the kitchen, steam rose off 6 service stations, and a sous chef was already shouting in French. Ethan eased through the bodies without touching anyone. The way a man walks through a room he has already mapped. By the silver service, an older man in a black vest paused mid-step. Walter Briggs looked at the janitor for a beat longer than a glance, then turned his face away as if he had been struck. Ethan, threading a mop bucket past the dishwashers, did not see him. In the front drawing room, Vivienne stood at the marble console with a guest list. Marcus came up behind her, set a hand at the small of her back, and lowered his voice. "Tonight has to be flawless. Your father's legacy. Our merger announcement. There's no second take. I know what tonight is." "Then breathe, darling. You look like a woman about to lose a war." She did not breathe. She made another mark on the list. They left for the east corridor. Ethan came around the corner at the same moment. A carpet shampoo cart pushed ahead of him. He stopped short. Vivienne stepped back, frowning, and lifted one hand without speaking, the gesture a queen uses to clear a footman. He moved aside. She passed without a word. 3 steps later, she glanced back. Something about the way he held his shoulders did not fit the uniform. She filed the thought away and forgot it by the time she reached the stairs. It started with a hiss no one heard over the music. The outdoor grill on the east terrace, lit early for the canapé station, had a hairline crack in the propane line. The line ran behind the linen drape that screened the catering area from the lawn. The drape went up first, with a soft thump, the way fabric goes up when the air around it is already burning. 2 cooks turned and froze. The taller one swore in Spanish. The shorter one reached for the grill itself, which was the wrong thing to do. Ethan was already there. He did not run. He moved the way a man moves through a house he has built himself, around the corner of the prep table, hand on the propane tank valve before his eyes had finished cataloging the rest of the room. The valve closed under his palm. He stepped to the wall, killed the breaker for the outdoor outlets, and pulled the linen tea towel from his shoulder. He had soaked it under the prep sink in the 4 steps it took to cross the floor. The towel went on the rising flame and stayed there. He pressed it down once, hard, and the fire went out as if a hand had simply closed around it. 11 seconds. The shorter cook was still reaching. "Back," Ethan said. 2 more steps. Against the cold wall, both cooks moved. He stayed where he was, the towel between his fingers, watching the seam of the propane line to see whether the metal would breathe again. It did not. Vivienne came through the swing door at a run. She had been in the next room and heard the shout. She stopped at the threshold. She did not understand, at first, what she was looking at, because what she was looking at was a janitor standing very still over a piece of fabric that should have been a disaster, and two grown men flattened against a wall, breathing the way frightened animals breathe. She had seen her father give orders that emptied rooms. She had seen her own people sweat under her. She had never seen anyone move the way this man had just moved. Behind her, Walter let out a breath he had been holding longer than a breath should be held. Under his voice, almost to himself, he said something she half caught. Same as always. She turned. "What did you say?" Walter inclined his head, the perfect angle of a man who had served 3 generations of Hartwells. "Nothing, miss. Only relieved." She held his eyes a moment. He did not give her anything else. Ethan walked past her with the burned towel folded over his wrist. He did not stop. He did not ask for thanks. She opened her mouth and then closed it, and then opened it again, and by then he was through the door. Marcus appeared at her elbow. Late as men like Marcus are always late to the work. "What was that?" "A fire." He put it out. "He?" "The maintenance man." Marcus laughed, short and bright. "Probably an ex-firefighter or something. Don't make it a story, darling. We have 300 eyes on us tonight. Let's not give them a janitor to talk about." He took her elbow. She let him, but at the door, she turned her head, and her gaze found the back of the man walking down the service hall and stayed there until the swinging door closed between them. Upstairs, Walter let himself into the general's private study with the master key he had carried for 21 years. He went to the second drawer of the desk and slid out a manila envelope, soft at the corners from age. The label, printed in faded blue ink, read Iron Shepherd classified not for release. Walter laid his hand flat on the envelope. He did not open it. He stood in the dark for a long minute. Then he put it back exactly where he had found it and locked the drawer. The receiving line ran along the curved hallway of the south wing for the better part of an hour. General Richard Hartwell stood at the head of it in his dark suit with the small enamel pin at his lapel, the only piece of jewelry he had worn in 40 years. He shook every hand. He remembered every name. He did not look tired. When the line ended, he and Vivienne walked together to the bandstand at the head of the ballroom. The quartet had moved into a slow Brahms. He took his daughter's elbow at the second step up, less for support than for the look of the thing. She lifted her glass. The room went quiet. "To my father," she said, "who taught me that legacy is not what you inherit, it is what you refuse to compromise. Happy 70th, Daddy." There was applause. The general lifted his own glass, drank, and then placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. He spoke without notes. "Thank you. To all of you. To the family in this room. And to the family we lost." His voice caught on the last word, only for a beat, and then it was steady again. Vivienne felt the small tightening in his fingers on her shoulder and held her own face perfectly still. Marcus, who had been waiting at the foot of the dais, took the moment as his cue. He stepped up, smiling, and lifted his hand for the microphone. "Sir, Vivienne, friends." A pause for the room to find him. "Tonight is also a moment for the future. I'm proud to tell you that the Hartwell-Thorne partnership signed this morning. We will be announcing the formal merger on Monday." The applause was loud. The general's eyebrow lifted a single millimeter. He had not been told it would be tonight. Behind the dais, by the side service door, Ethan came through with a wheeled trolley of fresh glasses. He did not look toward the speeches. He angled the cart along the wall, away from the floor, the way staff had been told to angle anything that rolled. The front wheel caught the edge of an unmarked floor seam. A flute toppled. It struck the marble at Vivienne's heels and broke as the quartet drew breath between movements. Champagne spread across the floor. "You don't belong in this room." Her voice came down on the silence like a blade. "Look at me when I'm talking." Marcus, half a step behind her, did not stop her. He smiled. "Is this how Hartwell Hospitality trains its people?" he called, loud enough to reach the back of the room. "Maybe we should review the staffing contractor." Vivienne kept going. She heard her own voice from the outside, the way you hear yourself in a recording. She said 3 more things she would later not be able to repeat to anyone. Ethan rose. He did not speak. He did not lower his head. He looked at her, and for a moment, only a moment, his eyes did something she did not know how to read. It was not anger. It was not shame. It was something quieter than either. And it was, she realized after, the closest thing to pity she had ever received. Her face went hot. At the back of the ballroom, the general lowered his glass an inch. He did not look at his daughter. He looked at the man with the towel. There was a stillness in the way the stranger held his weight on his right leg, a habit that he had seen before in 100 other men and could not, at first, place. Walter appeared at his shoulder with the decanter. "More, sir?" "Yes," Walter poured. As he did, the old man bent his head a fraction. "Sir, you might want to look more carefully tonight." The general turned, but Walter was already gone. Vivienne did not stay on the floor. She let Marcus rest his hand on her back for the photograph, lifted her glass for the toast that followed, and then excused herself with the smile she had been taught to use at 14. She walked the length of the south corridor without looking at the walls she had grown up looking at. She closed the library door behind her. The library smelled of leather and lamp oil. Her father's books, alphabetized by the housekeeper of her childhood, climbed 2 stories to the painted ceiling. She did not look at them. She sat down at the long desk by the window and opened her laptop. She told herself she was checking the merger schedule. She typed Ethan Cole into the Hartwell Hospitality personnel system. The record came up clean and short. 3 years of employment as maintenance technician the second. Background check passed. No incidents, no commendations, 2 emergency contacts, a daughter, age 8, and a neighbor. Previous employment was blank. She read the field twice. People did not have empty previous employment fields. Even teenagers had a Walmart on their record somewhere. She opened a new tab and typed his name into the search bar. She added Charleston. She added South Carolina. She tried the Navy. She tried the Marines. A 40-year-old man with no online trace was not a man without a past. It was a man whose past someone had taken the time to clean. She sat back. Her own reflection looked at her from the dark window glass, and she did not like the look on its face. On the back veranda, 2 flights below, Ethan sat on the lowest step with his elbows on his knees. He had not lit a cigarette in a year and a half. He took one out of his shirt pocket now and held it without lighting it. The marsh wind came up cool off the harbor. He called Lily a second time. Mrs. Doreen answered. She fell asleep on chapter 11, Sugar. Book is on her chest. Finger holding the page. "That's my girl. You doing all right over there?" He looked at the cigarette. He put it back in his pocket. "I'm fine. Tell her I'll be there to read the last page." He hung up. He listened to the water against the seawall for a while. The kitchen door behind him opened. Footsteps stopped 1 stride away. A coffee cup, white china, no saucer, came down on the step beside him. The man who set it down said nothing. Ethan did not turn. "Thank you." Black, no sugar. As I recall, Ethan turned now. Walter was looking out at the dark, not at him. "Do I know you, sir?" "Not yet." A pause. The water spoke against the wall. "But you saved a man I cared about 12 years ago. I have wanted to bring you a cup of coffee for 12 years. Walter went back inside without waiting for a reply. The door closed softly behind him. Ethan sat with the cup warming his hand and did not drink for a long time. In the library window above, Vivienne stood with one shoulder against the casement, watching the 2 figures on the veranda. She had not opened the window. She could not hear them, but she saw Walter Briggs, who had not in her memory once placed a hand on the shoulder of anyone outside the family, set a cup beside the janitor, as if he were laying flowers at a grave. She turned away from the glass. The room she walked back into was the same room she had left, but she did not feel, any more, that it belonged to her. The general did not give his speech from the dais. He gave it from the floor, in the open square where the dancing had been, with the chandelier directly above him and the chairs pushed back into a loose circle of guests. He liked the eye level of it. He had told his daughter, years ago, that a man who needs height to be heard is not yet a man to be listened to. He spoke for 7 minutes about honor. He spoke about service. He named 4 officers who had not come home from the wars of his lifetime, the way another man might name his children. Then he stopped, and the room understood that the rest of what he had to say had not been on the schedule. "I have a son," he said. "His name was Daniel. Most of you know that. Some of you knew him." The silence in the room sharpened. "What you do not know is how he came home. Daniel did not come home in a flag. He came home because someone refused to leave him behind. A team went into a place they were not supposed to be, for a man they were not ordered to retrieve, and they brought him out, and he lived 11 days. 11 days I would not have had. 11 days my wife had to say goodbye. 11 days I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for. He paused. His glass shook a fraction and stilled. I never met that man. I never got to shake his hand. I have been looking for him for 15 years. I am still looking. Vivienne, standing at the inside edge of the circle, felt the floor adjust under her feet. She had been told her brother died on a hill. She had been told there was nothing to be done. She had not been told there was a man. In the far corner, by the service pillar, Ethan stood with his hand wrapped around the wood handle of a mop. He did not move. His jaw set once, the smallest tightening, and held. Walter stood 3 paces from him. He looked at the floor. Marcus, who had been raised to know when to applaud, and had not been raised to know when not to, brought his hands together first. The clap landed in the silence like a glass dropped on tile. A few other guests, embarrassed for him, picked it up. The general let it pass without looking at him. If that man is alive, the general said, and I believe he is, I would trade everything in this room for 1 minute to thank him. He lifted his glass. The room lifted its own. Vivienne held her glass at her chin. She did not drink. Without meaning to, she searched the wall for the janitor. She found him. He was looking back. The contact lasted half a second. She felt her heart miss a beat in a way that had nothing to do with the speech and everything to do with the way he had not looked away. He looked away first, on his own time. He set the mop against the wall. He walked, without hurry, through the side door into the service corridor. No one saw him leave. Except Walter. Except in the long mirror behind the bar, Vivienne, who had not stopped watching him. The east service corridor ran behind the kitchen and ended at a small door that opened onto the side garden. The carpet there was old wool, a runner the housekeepers had been told for 2 decades not to throw out. A passing waiter had clipped a bottle on a low shelf and red wine had bled into the runner in a wide, dark shape. Ethan knelt at the edge of the stain with a clean towel and a bowl of soda water. He pushed his sleeves up to the elbow, the way a man pushes them up when he means to work for a while. The cuff of his right sleeve caught on the inside of his forearm and rode up further than usual. On the inside of his right forearm, just below the bend of the elbow, a tattoo showed in dark ink. A ram stood on a high rock, head lowered, horns curved like a question. Beneath the rock, in small Roman letters, 2 words, Nemo Residet. Beneath the words, a unit code in numerals, 1-OIS-09. The general came down the corridor looking for his daughter. He stopped at the corner. He had been a soldier for 46 years. He had buried more men than he had named children. He had read the operations report on his son's recovery so many times that he could see the topographic lines of the valley in his sleep. He had never seen the team patch outside of a redacted photograph. He saw the ram. He saw the words. He saw the code. The general did not make a sound. His left hand, the one that had once held the line at a forward operating base under mortar fire, trembled exactly once and went still. Soldier, the word came out so quietly, Ethan almost did not hear it. Then he heard it. He looked up from the carpet. He had been ready to say something about the wine. He saw the older man's face, and his body answered before his mind did. He stood up. He set his feet. His hands came down at his sides, palms flat against his thighs. He was not trying to come to attention. He came to attention anyway. Where did you get that? Ethan opened his mouth and did not have an answer that he was allowed to give. Behind the general, a footstep on the wood. Walter stepped into the corridor from the kitchen side, and for the first time in 21 years of service, he spoke before he was spoken to. Sir. His voice was steady and old and finally tired. This is Master Sergeant Cole, Iron Shepherd, the first man through the door. The general's eyes did not leave Ethan's face. He took 1 step forward. He took another. He stopped an arm's length away. He lifted his hand. It was the hand of a man who had pinned medals onto chests and folded flags into triangles and signed letters to mothers whose sons he had ordered into places they did not return from. It was the hand of a man who had never, in 15 years, gotten to put it where he was now trying to put it. Ethan took the hand. He shook it once. He did not speak. At the far end of the corridor, The door from the ballroom swung open. Vivienne came through, looking for her father, the question already on her mouth. She stopped 2 steps in. She saw her father, who had not held a stranger's hand in the entire span of her adult memory, holding the hand of the man she had humiliated in front of 200 people, and not letting go. She froze where she stood. The general let go of Ethan's hand. He laid his other hand briefly on Ethan's shoulder, then took it away. He turned without speaking, and walked back up the corridor toward the ballroom. He did not look at his daughter as he passed her. He did not need to. He said, without stopping, "Come with me, both of you." Ethan picked up the bowl and the towel. He set them on a side table. He followed. In the ballroom, Marcus had reassembled his court near the fireplace. He was telling a story with both hands. Something about a junior associate who had to be let go that morning. Something about discipline being the difference between a brand and a business. Several guests were laughing in the careful way people laugh at the boss's stories. Marcus stopped mid-sentence when he saw the general come through the doors. He stopped because the general did not stop. He stopped because the janitor was walking beside the general, not behind him. The general reached the center of the floor. He did not climb the dais. He lifted a small silver knife from a service tray and struck the side of his glass once. He did not strike it hard. The room came to silence anyway, because of who was holding the knife. "I have one more thing to say tonight," the general said, "and then I will let you go home." He did not raise his voice. In April of 2009, a Delta team of 8 men was sent into a valley north of Kandahar. They were sent to retrieve a wounded officer. That officer was my son, Captain Daniel Hartwell. 6 of those 8 men did not come back. The 2 who did carried my boy out on a litter for 19 kilometers under fire. They got him to a field hospital alive. He lived 11 more days. I flew from Washington. I held his hand. I told him what a father needs to tell his son before he lets him go. I had 11 days because of them. I had any goodbye at all because of them. He paused. He let it settle. The man who walked at the front of that team, who went through the door first, who carried my son on his own back for the last 3 kilometers because the second stretcher bearer had been hit, is in this room tonight. The room did not move. His name is Ethan Cole. He is here because my company hired him to clean our floors. Tonight, my daughter looked at him and told him he did not belong in this room. Tonight, I am telling you that he is the reason I had 11 days with my only son. Tonight, I am telling you that if any room in this country belongs to him, it is this one. The silence held. Marcus had gone the color of old paper. A woman near the piano put her hand to her mouth and turned her face into her husband's shoulder. 3 older men along the back wall, men who had served before the general had been a general, were already on their feet. Vivienne could not feel the floor. She looked at Ethan. He did not look back at her. He looked at the general. He inclined his head 1 inch. "Sir, I was doing my job. They all did theirs." The voice was quiet. It carried. The 3 veterans at the back came forward. 2 more stood. Walter, by the side door, was looking at the carpet. The general turned to his daughter. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Vivienne, we will talk later." It was softer than any reprimand he had ever given her, and it cut deeper than any of them. Ethan stepped back from the center of the floor. He inclined his head to the general. He walked toward the side door. His path took him past Vivienne. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. He paused and gave her the small polite nod a stranger gives a stranger, and went on. The door closed behind him. At 1 in the morning, the catering trucks pulled away one by one, and the last of the lights along the front drive went out. The house gave off the cooling sound a large house gives when the people are gone. Vivienne sat alone at the long desk in the library where she had sat earlier in the evening. She had not turned on the lamp. The window showed her own dim shape over the harbor. The door opened. Her father did not knock in his own house. He came in with the manila envelope under his arm, the soft corners she had never seen, and laid it on the desk in front of her. He stood there a moment, looking down at her, and she could not tell from his face whether what was in him was anger or something larger and quieter. "Read it." He did not wait. He walked to the window, put his hands behind his back, and watched the harbor. She opened the envelope. The pages inside were partially redacted, black bars over names and grid coordinates, but the narrative was intact. She read the after-action report on Operation Iron Shepherd. She read about the valley. She read about the stretcher. She read a margin note in her father's writing, dated 3 years after the fact. Get me his name. She read the casualty list. She read her brother's name and the date of his death. She read the number 11, written without comment, in the medical addendum. She read it twice. Then she closed the envelope. I didn't know. No, her father said. You didn't. You never told me. I never told anyone. He turned from the window. His face was the face of a man who had finished a long walk. Now, he said, read it again. And tell me you knew who you were talking to tonight. He left the room. He did not close the door hard. He did not need to. In a small frame house in North Charleston, the porch light was on. Ethan let himself in through the kitchen with his boots in one hand. He set the boots on the mat. He drank a glass of water at the sink. He walked down the hall to the second door on the right. Lily had fallen asleep with the book on her chest and her finger in the page, the way Mrs. Doreen had said. He sat on the edge of the bed and watched her breathe. He touched her hair once, very lightly, with the back of one knuckle. She stirred. Daddy, I'm here. You're early. I told you I would be. She made room. He sat against the headboard. She handed him the book. He read her the last page of chapter 11, the part where the pig figures it out, and then he read the first page of chapter 12, because she asked. And then she was asleep again with her cheek against his arm. At a little past 10 the next morning, a black car came down the narrow street and stopped one house short. Vivian sat at the wheel and looked at the small frame house with the swing set in the side yard. Ethan was in the yard, walking beside a pink bicycle, one hand on the back of the seat and the other on the handlebar. Lily wobbled, righted, and then went down sideways into the grass with a laugh so clear Vivienne could hear it through the closed window. He lifted her up. He brushed grass out of her braid. He pointed at the bike, and she nodded, and they started again. Vivienne sat with her hands on the wheel. She had been ready to ring the bell. She did not. She turned the key. She drove away. In the rearview mirror, she saw him stop in the middle of the lawn, his hand still on the bicycle seat, watching her go. That evening, Marcus came into her office without an appointment. He sat down across from her desk without being asked. I've drafted a separation package for Cole. Non-disclosure, a year's salary, signed and filed by Friday. We get out ahead of any press before Monday's announcement. She looked at him for a long time. Get out of my office, Marcus. He smiled, because he thought he had misheard. Get out of my office. He got out. 3 days later, the general sent a car for Ethan. Ethan asked if it would be all right to ride in the front. The driver said it would. In the general's study, the morning light came in low through the shutters and laid bars across the rug. The general had laid out a folder of his own on the desk. Coffee for 2. He did not stand when Ethan came in. He gestured to the chair. I have an offer for you. I would like you to hear it before you decide. Ethan sat. He folded his hands. Head of corporate security for the Hartwell Group. Hartwell Hospitality, the holding company, the real estate side. Office of your own. A salary I will not insult you by naming out loud. A full ride at any college in the country for your daughter when the time comes. A house on Sullivan's Island. The lease in her name, in trust, in case anything happens to you. He paused. I will also write a letter, in my own hand, to every senior officer I still know, telling them what you did. I should have done it 15 years ago. I would like to do it now. Ethan let it sit a moment. He looked at the coffee. He looked up. Sir, I didn't carry your son out for a paycheck. I won't take one now. The general nodded once. He had expected it. He had hoped, briefly, to be wrong. Then what will you take? Ethan thought. The shape of the answer was small enough that it took him a moment to find it. A reference letter. The school where my daughter goes is hiring a maintenance lead. The pay is better than what I make now, and the hours mean I can be home when she gets off the bus. They might not take a janitor seriously without a word from someone. A word from you would do it. The general looked at him. Then he smiled. It was the first true smile his daughter would have seen on him in a year, if she had been in the room. He took out a sheet of letterhead and a fountain pen and wrote it on the spot. She was in the next room. She heard most of it through the cracked door. When Ethan had gone, she came in. Her father was capping the pen. He's the kind of man your brother would have brought home for dinner, he said. You missed him by an inch. She did not answer. She walked to the window and stood with her back to her father and looked out at the live oaks. By the end of that week, Marcus had begun the work of telling a particular kind of person, at a particular kind of dinner party, that the Hartwell engagement was off because Vivienne was unwell. 2 longtime investors called her assistant. She did not call them back. She was busy. She was learning to be a person she had not been raised to be, and there was no shortcut for it. On a Tuesday afternoon, she drove to the elementary school 3 blocks from the small frame house. She parked across the street from the playground fence. She did not get out of the car at first. When the bell rang for recess and the children spilled out onto the blacktop, she crossed the road and stood at the fence with her hands in her coat pockets. Ethan saw her from the doorway of the maintenance shed. He set down the wrench he was holding. He walked across the yard at his usual pace and stopped on the inside of the fence, 2 paces from her. She did not say sorry. She had thought about the word the whole drive over and decided it was too small a word to say out loud. "I was raised to never look down," she said. "I forgot it works the other way, too." He was quiet a moment. The wind lifted the corner of her coat. "That's a start." He turned back toward the children. 2 girls were calling his name. He went. 3 months later, Charleston had its first cold snap of the season, a thin frost on the harbor rail at dawn that was gone by 10. The Hartwell building downtown had a new name on the door of the corner office, Vivienne's, but the title was shorter than it had been. She had restructured. She had let 3 vice presidents go. She had lost 0.5% of the stock price in the first month and had not flinched, and her father had not asked her about it once, which was, in his vocabulary, a standing ovation. She had ended the engagement publicly. Marcus had moved on to a competitor in Atlanta. 2 of his stories were still in circulation. She had stopped reading them. She had begun showing up at the elementary school on the 3rd Thursday of every month with a stack of books and an envelope from the foundation she had quietly endowed in her brother's name. The principal called it the Daniel Hartwell Evening Reading Program. The children called it Miss Vivi's Books. Lily Cole had been the 3rd name on the sign-up sheet. Lily did not know who Vivienne was. She knew she was the lady who had brought Charlotte's Web and had said, when Lily reached for it, that it had been her favorite when she was 8, and that pigs in books were almost always smarter than people. On a Thursday in early December, Lily pulled Vivienne by the hand across the school courtyard at the end of the program and tugged her toward the maintenance shed. Daddy, come here. This is Miss Vivi. She gave me Charlotte's Web." Ethan came out wiping his hands on a shop rag. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at Vivienne over the top of his daughter's head. Vivienne looked back. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Lily, between them, did not notice. She was busy reading the back cover of the book aloud to herself, in the sing-song of an 8-year-old who knew the words by heart. Ethan smiled. It was small and slow and reached his eyes. Vivienne smiled back. Hers was smaller. It reached. The general invited them to Thanksgiving at the estate that week. He invited Ethan and Lily by handwritten note, delivered to the school. Walter, of course, was already part of the house. Lily had never been inside a house with a ballroom. She ran the length of it twice in her stocking feet, while the adults pretended not to watch. The general sat at the head of the long table. Walter sat to his right. Vivienne sat to his left. Ethan and Lily sat across from each other, 2 seats down, and Lily kicked her feet under the table the way she did at home. The general lifted his glass. He looked for a moment, like he might say his son's name. He did not. To those at this table, they drank. Later, when Lily had fallen asleep on the long sofa in the front parlor with her cheek on the velvet armrest and the book Vivienne had given her tucked under her arm, Walter brought a wool throw and laid it gently over her. He stood there a moment, looking down at the child, and his old face softened in a way it had not in years. Out on the back veranda, Ethan and Vivienne stood at the rail with the harbor lights below them. They did not stand close enough to touch. They stood close enough that their shoulders would have touched if either of them had leaned. "Will you ever forgive me?" He looked out at the water. "I already did. The night you didn't ring the doorbell." She did not understand. She started to ask. She did not ask. They stood there a while longer, not speaking, not naming the small new thing that was growing between them, because it was too early to name and they were both old enough to know it. Inside, the general stood at the window of the front parlor with one hand on the back of a wing chair. He watched the two figures on the veranda who were not touching. He looked down at the child asleep on his sofa with a book under her arm. For the first time in many, many years, he smiled the way a father smiles when he has finally been allowed to set something down.